I don't know, that's kind of a hard act to follow. But I think that I have another kind of value and wisdom to share with you, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm going to start, first of all, by pulling out my notes, which is always a good idea. We've all been hearing about work-life balance for a very long time. Meanwhile, nearly every client I've ever spoken with, first half of my career as a therapist, second half of my career as an executive coach and consultant, nobody has a balanced life. I don't have a balanced life. Nobody has a balanced life. It is a complete myth. There are people who look as if they have balanced lives, but it's an illusion, and it's just another way for us to feel lousy about ourselves because we don't think we've got it together as well as they do. Oh, they're over there. Got it. So, work-life balance not working so much, and as a result, most of us feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and inadequate a whole lot of the time. And I don't think life should have to be that way. But all right, we're tough business leaders. We know how to work hard. All right, you don't feel so great? Suck it up. You know, what's the big deal? Life is tough. That's not a very good answer, because we know from research that when you do that, there are a lot of negative things that happen. First of all, it reduces your productivity. You think if you work till you're exhausted, you'll get more done. Not so. The research shows that, in fact, you are less productive when you push past where you really have the energy. It reduces your creativity. How are you going to think about new ideas and creative stuff if you're feeling wiped out? It reduces your resilience, your ability to bounce back when there are barriers or problems or setbacks that you have to deal with. It reduces your interpersonal effectiveness. If you're tired, if you're exhausted, if you're frustrated, you don't have a lot of energy to give to other people or care about what they're thinking or feeling. It reduces your physical and mental health. We have good data on that, which not only reduces your ability to work, but it creates higher absenteeism in the people who work with and for you. It increases workplace accidents if people are exhausted. And finally, with all of that going on, it leads to lower revenue and higher costs in the workplace, to say nothing of personal suffering. So that's the so what. Why that work-life balance is, the fact that we don't have it is a problem. So I'm going to do you a demonstration of what work-life balance looks like. Let's see, I got a busy day, got some bills to pay, so I better bring these along. And I'm going to be giving a presentation at the CXO conference, so there's some stuff I need to read to get ready for that. And I'm hoping to get to the fitness club, so got to have my gym bag with me. And of course, I got to get my stuff for work. It's a busy day. There's a lot to get done at work. Oh, yeah, I got some company coming, so I'm going to have to spend some time cleaning the house. And I mean, there's a meal to cook, right? So I need to have my cooking ready to go. All right, you know, I got this. I feel like I'm doing pretty well. But I got this nagging feeling that I'm forgetting something, that there's something in the mix that I haven't thought of. Oh my gosh. It's the baby. That's what work-life balance looks like. It doesn't work. So, what do we do instead? I've come up with the notion of curating your life. So let's think for a little while about how a museum curator puts together a great exhibit. He or she has to solve 4 problems in order to do that. The first one is, what is this exhibit about? I need to be very clear. Okay? If I'm the curator and the director of the museum comes to me and says, Gail, I want you to make a nice exhibit, I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be about, so just kind of put some stuff together, that's not going to work. I've got to have a clear theme for the exhibit. And then, as the curator, I would need to make 3 difficult choices. The museum's full of all kinds of beautiful, wonderful stuff, most of which doesn't belong in my exhibit. It's not that it's not good stuff, it just doesn't belong in this exhibit. So there are a lot of things I'm not going to put into the exhibit. Then there are a number of things that need to be in the exhibit, but they're not the main or most important thing. They go into one of the side rooms for the people who are really interested. And last are the 1 or 2, maybe 3 main items that are going to hang in the Great Hall and really capture the essence of what this exhibit is about. And if the museum curator does that, he or she is going to create a beautiful and meaningful exhibit. You can do the same thing with your life. Work on your life exhibit, starting with, what is my life exhibit about? What are the things that I want people to see when they look at my life? What do I want to be putting my energy into? And I think there are 4 elements that go into that. First of all, are my values. What do my values tell me are the important things that you should be paying attention to in your life? Second, what are my talents? What am I good at? What comes naturally to me? Third, where are there opportunities? Because I may have, like, for example, I may decide that, what really means a lot to me is to be a ballerina. But there's not a lot of opportunities for 72-year-old beginning ballerinas. So that's just not going to happen. I better figure out another exhibit that I'm going to do. And finally, what is my passion? If I can find an intersection between my values, my talents, the opportunities, and my passion, that's going to give me a pretty good idea about what my exhibit ought to be about. And then I have tough choice number 1, because I have to take a look at all the things I'm spending my energy on and decide what I'm not going to do. What am I going to eliminate from my choices? And I'm going to share a story with you to give you an example of how this can play out. I have a friend and colleague whom I really respect, and he called me up a while back and said, Gail, I'd really like you to think about taking on a leadership role in our professional association. That was a really great honor for me. First of all, that he was asking me, and second, to be the head of a professional association, and I was tempted. And then I thought, okay, Gail, think about it. What's your exhibit about at this time in your life? First is running and growing my business. This isn't really going to help with that. The people in the professional association are my colleagues, and in many cases, they're my competitors. They're nice people, but they aren't likely going to be sending clients to me. Second thing my exhibit is about is I want to be the best grandmother I can possibly be. Yeah, more time with the psychological association, less time with the grandchildren. That's not going to work so well. And third, I want to keep expanding myself and my life through travel, through new experiences. I don't want to get stale. Running a psychological association, I'm sorry to say, not likely to be a big expansive opportunity for me. So I called back my friend and said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take it on. And he was not happy with me. He was disappointed, and he let me know that. But that was the right choice for designing my life exhibit at this time. Now, here are some tips about how to say no. One of the easiest ways is to delegate, to look at things that you are doing with your time and energy and say, I can get somebody else to do that. Sometimes I can find somebody else to do it who's going to do it better than I'm doing it. I used to design all my own PowerPoint slides. I'm terrible at that. They looked awful. And I finally realized, get a graphic artist, pay her a little money, and get the much nicer PowerPoint slides. Aren't they gorgeous? Yeah. So there you see, Delegating, good idea. Dealing with the obnoxious roommate. This is a little bit reminiscent of what the previous speaker was talking about, but labeled a little differently. The obnoxious roommate is the voice inside your head who tells you what a loser you are. You know, really, you're going to say no to this? Other people find a way to get it all done. Other people would take that on. Other people wouldn't disappoint their friend or their mother or their employees. What's the matter with you that you can't do that? That's the obnoxious roommate. And we have to learn how to shut that voice down because it really does diminish us. We have to be able to handle criticism. When somebody doesn't like the choice that we make, we've got to be able to deal with that and say, I understand you're disappointed. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to do that. Sometimes you have to practice a little bit in how to say no, maybe rehearse the conversation in advance. Don't over-explain or over-apologize. I find this is a problem that women often have. We give 75 excuses and share much too much information. Here's my secret. There's a word I love, bandwidth. And when somebody wants me to do something, I decide I don't want to do it. One of my secrets is to say, I'm sorry, I just don't have the bandwidth. Doesn't tell them anything. I don't have the bandwidth because I'd rather sit home watching television. I don't know, but it works. And finally, do use the right channel. If this is a difficult conversation where you're saying no about something important to somebody you care about, don't text them. Don't email them. Have a conversation, preferably in person, so that you can talk this through with them. I had a client a few years back, a very successful, very senior executive, and he gave me a motto that I've been using ever since and teaching to my clients. He said, only do what only you can do. I'll say it again. Only do what only you can do. Now, that's aspirational, right? We all sometimes do something that someone else could do. Garbage needs to be taken out, you take out the garbage. But to think about that, is this something that only I can do? Or are there other people who could do it as well or better? Can help to make that decision about whether you should be saying no to it. Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute because I do want this to have an element of conversation. So far, making sense, agree, don't agree, questions? Want to throw in some comments?
I love the obnoxious roommate.
You like the obnoxious? You shouldn't love the obnoxious roommate. I understand. Yeah, it's a good one, I think. Okay, well, keep thinking, and I'll take another break in a little while, but I'm going to go on to the next step, which I hate to tell you is even harder than saying no. The next step is, you know, those things that were in the side rooms in the exhibit. They have to be in the exhibit, but they're not the important stuff. That means all the things in your life that you have to do, but you don't have to be great at them. You just have to be good enough. In fact, you probably are going to be mediocre. Whoa, wait a minute. I am supposed to settle for good enough. I'm supposed to be comfortable with mediocrity? Yes. Yes, that's the message. Look, the reality is we're already mediocre at a lot of the stuff we do anyway. We just waste our energy feeling guilty about it. Instead, let's make conscious choices about where we are going to be C players. I'm going to give you an example from the corporate world. I had a client, she was a very senior executive in a global communications agency. Rebecca, that's not her real name. And it was great. If you emailed Rebecca about anything, you would be guaranteed to get a response within 5 minutes. Never had to wait for a response. But Rebecca's rigid rule for herself that she had to respond immediately to everything was making her a less effective leader. She was spending her time in meetings, not paying attention, but answering email. And she was teaching her team that they could always expect her to be at their beck and call, even about very unimportant things. So after we'd worked on curating her life for a while, I began to find that when I emailed Rebecca, sometimes I had to wait for a response. Sometimes I even had to ping her a second time. And you know what? That was good enough. That's the kind of choice that I'm talking about. So, making a decision about what you're going to be mediocre at. How do you do that? There are 5 questions that I typically will ask myself. First of all, is this activity important to me? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? 2, is it important to others that I care about or are influential in my life, like my boss, for example? Okay, that has to weigh into the equation. 3, what would happen if I did this to a mediocre standard? Would it really make a big difference to anybody? Number 4, does this activity make me happy? On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy? And 5, whose standards matter to me on this task? My own or somebody else's? And that's because sometimes, the obnoxious roommate sometimes is sharing standards that came from my mother or my grandmother or my next door neighbor, powerful voices in my life, and I'm trying to live up to those standards when they aren't even my own. Now, I think many people, when they listen to this, think, Gail, I can do this in my personal life. I can accept being a C player in my personal life, but not in my work. My work has to be great all the time. And I want to give you an example from the corporate world. I was retained by the head of legal services for a global pharmaceutical firm. He was the head of the legal department. And he said, Gail, look, I've got a problem. Business leaders are coming to my lawyers all the time. And much of the time, some of the time, they are asking us to do work which is strategically important, that's going to make a difference to the well-being of the company. Some of the time, it's stuff that, yeah, it has to be done, but it's not really strategic. And some of the time, it's just silly. They don't need a lawyer to be doing this work. When he started to talk to me, I thought, holy cow, that sounds exactly like my curating model applied to the work of a legal department. And he asked for my help, first of all, in helping to teach the lawyers how to differentiate, and then teaching them how to have conversations with their business clients so that they were spending, and he put out percentages. I think it was 80% of their time should be on the strategic work, or 85%, 15% on the non-strategic work, and 0% on the silly stuff. And that was the goal that he held for them. So this matters in your work world as well as in your personal world, both for your own well-being and for the well-being of the organization. So far, we've talked about saying no, which is really tough. And we've talked about settling for good enough, which is really hard. So I finally have some good news for you. If you do those 2 things, you get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong in your exhibit, and you settle for good enough in other stuff that is necessary but not important, you will have the energy for your greatness. And you won't have to feel overwhelmed, exhausted all the time. So, how do you be great? First of all, it's important to recognize that being great doesn't mean being famous. You might be famous for what you're great at, but it might be something that is very quiet or behind the scenes. I will tell you, I'm doing reasonably well on time, good. One of the types of greatness that I love comes from my years as a clinician, where people would come to see me who had terrible backgrounds, had come from poverty and loneliness and fractured families and abuse and neglect, the whole works. Yet there they were in my office, adults leading productive lives, making families, yes, they were in pain. That was why they were coming to see me. But they were doing what needed to be done. And often I would say to them, how do you explain this? How do you explain that you came from that and look at who you are today? And every single time, what they would say is, there was this person. I get choked up about this every time I talk about it. One person in their lives who made them feel as children that they mattered, that they were worth something, that they were important. A school teacher, a scout leader, a friend's mother, people who welcomed them and fed them and helped them feel that they mattered and that they were worth something. Those people were great. They transformed a child's life. They may not even know that they did it, but they did it. And to me, that's an incredible example of what it means to be great. They'll never be famous for that, unless the person writes an autobiography and says, it was my next door neighbor. But most likely not. It's just quiet, powerful greatness. Legacy. Particularly as we get older, we tend to think about legacy. What do I want to be remembered for? What do I want to pass on to the people who are going to follow in my footsteps? That's one element of greatness. Greatness takes talent, it takes opportunity, and it takes dedication. My husband is a professional musician and teaches musicians. And he told me that when young people come to him, he can tell right away who's got a lot of talent and who's got so-so talent. But that does not predict who is going to become a great musician. What predicts it is how hard are they willing to work. The dedication piece matters more than the talent. Now, the other thing that's interesting about greatness is even when you figure out your greatness and you're all excited and passionate and you really want to do it, sometimes we run into procrastination. You know, get up in the morning and say, I'm going to do this great task today, and we fritter away our time and don't do it. So managing procrastination is one of the challenges of going for your greatness. Fortunately, over the years, psychologists have done some research. We know some tools about things that can help with procrastination. One is setting up a system of rewards and or punishments for yourself. If I get this project done by Friday afternoon, I get to go out and have a nice steak dinner that night. If I don't, I have to eat beans, whatever. Something like that, a positive, that I self-inflicted in terms of rewards and punishments. Sometimes we don't get started on a task because it is so huge, it feels overwhelming. What is even the point of getting started? Chunking it down into bite-sized pieces. I don't have to do the whole thing. I don't have to write the entire book. I just have to write the first 10 pages. That kind of chunking things down can really help with procrastination. Visualizing the goal. What is it going to be like when I get this done? How is it going to feel to be able to say, I did this, I got it done, and it's great? That can help. And making a public commitment. If you tell somebody else, I'm writing a book and I'm going to have it done by Christmas, you're more likely to get it done. So those are some of the tactics. By the way, there are a bunch more, and in a little while I'll tell you how you can learn about the bunch more. These tools of managing procrastination work both in terms of managing yourself, but also managing others. Many of the leaders I work with talk about their frustration when people who report to them don't get stuff done on time. And sometimes these tactics can be used in the workplace to help energize and motivate and influence your employees, your reports, so that they'll get the stuff done. I want to take a minute now to tell a story about one of my favorite examples of greatness. It is the story of the Watchtowers. Any of you live in Los Angeles? Okay, so maybe you've heard of the Watchtowers. The Watchtowers are located in a tough neighborhood in Los Angeles. They are a collection of fantastic metal structures covered with wild mosaics. They seem, when you see them, completely out of place and otherworldly. And by the way, it's not like they're a building that's usual. They are just structures. What the heck is going on here? The watchtowers are the largest work of art on the planet that was built by one person alone. That person was Simon Rhodia, an illiterate construction worker. In 1921, Rhodia decided he wanted to do something big. He bought a small plot of land near the train station so people could see his work. And for the next 33 years, he spent every minute of his free time building the towers. Let's face it, it is pretty weird to spend 33 years building something bizarre and useless. Yet on the other hand, what a magnificent achievement. Rhodia wanted to do something big, and by golly, he did it. The towers are breathtakingly beautiful, and many people find them spiritually inspiring. The watchtowers show us what passion and thinking big and persistence and, yes, obsession can accomplish. How many of us long for some of that passion in our lives, to leave a unique and beautiful legacy? Perhaps we need to spend a little more time discovering our inner Simon Rhodia. Business, a lot of business, is about being the best. Am I out of time? A couple minutes. I'm almost done. It's about being the best. What we have learned is that people do their best work when they get to work on what they love. Marcus Buckingham just published a book called Love Plus Work with a whole bunch of that research in it. So to get the best out of yourself and out of your people, it's not a choice between do what you love or do your best work. It's do what you love and do your best work. Even if you can spend 20% of your work time doing what you love, that makes a vast difference to your productivity and the contribution that you can make to your company. So it goes together. Key takeaways. Don't try to balance your life. It is a hopeless task. Instead, work on curating your life, which means get clear on what your exhibit is about, say no to the things that don't belong in your exhibit, settle for good enough in the things that are necessary but not important, and then take all that unleashed energy and focus it on your greatness. What I would suggest that you do is think about one thing different, one thing you might do differently to make a start of this. You don't have to do it all at once. Do one thing different out of all the things I said and take that first step. Okay, this is me. That's how you can get in touch with me. I work with people on how to be as powerful, as productive, and as joyful in their work as they possibly can. I would be pleased to have a conversation with you or to work with your company if you think that this would be useful to your people. I can help you bring the best out of yourself and your team. So I would suggest you take out your phone and take a picture of this slide and then email me, and my assistant Julie will find us a good meeting time. I'm going to, if I may, just take one more moment. Anybody have a burning question or comment that you want before I vacate the stage? Thank you for your attention.